It begins not with sand, but with water. You stand at the edge of understanding, peering into a mystery that spans millennia, where beneath the endless waves of ochre dunes stretching from Mauritania to Sudan, there once lay an ocean of grass, trees, and winding rivers. The Sahara, today the largest hot desert on Earth, was once green. A living, breathing landscape, alive with rain, elephants, hippos, and perhaps something else entirely. In the classified archives of Langley, former NSA analyst Roger Hamilton first glimpsed the impossible. Declassified keyhole satellite data from the 1970s revealed patterns beneath the sand that defied conventional geology. Straight lines, perfect rectangles, geometric forms that nature does not create. For decades, these images remained buried in bureaucratic silence, their implications too profound for public consumption. When you've spent 30 years reading satellite imagery, Hamilton recalls, his weathered hands tracing patterns only he can see, you learn to distinguish between what the Earth builds and what man builds. What I found under the Sahara wasn't natural. The thermal signatures showed structures with 90-degree angles extending for kilometers underground. We're talking about architectural planning that rivals modern urban development, buried beneath sand dunes that have shifted for millennia. Hamilton's voice carries the weight of secrets held too long. In his modest Virginia apartment, walls lined with maps he's legally forbidden to discuss, he spreads out thermal imaging printouts from missions that officially never happened. The patterns are unmistakable: rectangular grids, circular compounds, and linear features that suggest not just settlement, but sophisticated urban planning on a massive scale. Scientists call it the African humid period, a time when monsoons reached far north, feeding vast lakes that shimmered where dunes now rise. Yet even now, satellite imagery reveals faint scars of what used to be rivers, etched across the land like the veins of a forgotten body. In the last few decades, radar data from space missions has uncovered ghostly traces beneath the dunes, buried channels that once fed mighty rivers. One, known as the Tamanrasset River, may have been larger than the Nile, flowing westward toward the Atlantic. Its path runs silently beneath modern sands, stretching for more than 500 kilometers. If humans ever followed that river, they may have found paradise in the heart of what we now call desolation. The river's ancient course, mapped by classified military satellites, shows evidence of systematic modification. Engineered channels, artificial lakes, and what appear to be massive irrigation networks that demonstrate technological sophistication far beyond what historians attribute to Neolithic peoples. Pollen samples taken from ancient lake beds in Chad and Niger confirm that the Sahara once supported dense vegetation. Around 10,000 years ago, rainfall was abundant and the land bloomed with life. The bones of giraffes, buffalo, and even crocodiles have been uncovered in places now hundreds of miles from the nearest permanent water source. But these discoveries represent only fragments of a larger puzzle, pieces of evidence that suggest something far more complex than simple nomadic societies. Retired CIA cartographer William Brooks spent his career mapping the unmappable. His classified assignments took him to places that don't exist on public maps, tracking water sources and underground installations across North Africa. In his Baltimore suburban home, surrounded by maps he's legally forbidden to discuss, Brooks shares what decades of secrecy have taught him about the true nature of what lies beneath the world's largest desert. The agency knew about the buried river systems long before NASA made them public, he says quietly, his fingers drumming against a coffee table stacked with innocuous-looking folders. We had ground-penetrating radar in the 80s that could see through sand like it was glass. What we found? Let's just say some knowledge gets classified for reasons that have nothing to do with national security. The subsurface mapping revealed not just rivers, but engineered waterways. canal systems that connected massive underground reservoirs, infrastructure that suggested centralized planning, and technological capability that challenges everything we think we know about prehistoric Africa. Brooks pulls out a folder marked with faded classification stamps, though the contents have been declassified for over a decade. The images show vast underground networks stretching across the continent's midsection, connecting what were once major population centers along the ancient river systems. The engineering evident in these buried structures demonstrates hydraulic knowledge that wouldn't be seen again until Roman times, or perhaps was never truly lost, merely hidden beneath the advancing sand. At Gobero, a site on the edge of the Ténéré Desert in Niger, archaeologists discovered an ancient cemetery dating back to this lush period. The people buried there lived beside a lake that shimmered under a generous sky. They fished, hunted, and left behind tools carved with remarkable precision. Yet these discoveries pose a contradiction that has puzzled scientists and historians alike. If the Sahara was once so full of life, why is there so little evidence of complex civilization? The answer may lie not in what has been found, but in what has been systematically concealed. Dr. Patricia Rodriguez, former Pentagon geologist with the Defense Mapping Agency, spent 25 years analyzing subsurface anomalies for military installations. Her security clearance gave her access to geological surveys that civilian researchers never see. Now retired to a quiet suburb outside Washington, she speaks carefully about what lies beneath the world's largest desert, her words measured by decades of enforced silence. The DoD has been interested in the Sahara's subsurface structures since the Cold War, Rodriguez explains, settling into her study surrounded by geological maps and seismic readouts. Not for what's there now, but for what used to be there. The radar signatures we detected suggested urban planning on a massive scale, grid patterns, aqueduct systems, architecture that predates known civilization by thousands of years. Her files contain data that would revolutionize archaeology if made public. Deep penetrating radar surveys conducted during the 1980s revealed chambers and corridors extending hundreds of meters below the surface across multiple sites. The geometric precision of these structures defies natural formation. In one location near the Algeria-Libya border, magnetometry detected a complex covering nearly 8 square kilometers, with internal divisions suggesting specialized areas, residential quarters, storage facilities, what might have been administrative centers. We found evidence of three-dimensional planning, Rodriguez continues, pointing to cross-sectional diagrams that show multiple levels connected by vertical shafts. These weren't caves or natural voids. They were engineered spaces with consistent dimensions, uniform wall thicknesses, and what appeared to be ventilation systems. The engineering principles demonstrated knowledge of structural load distribution, drainage, and climate control that rivaled modern underground installations. The implications of Rodriguez's findings extend far beyond archaeology. If advanced engineering existed in the Sahara thousands of years before conventional history acknowledges, it suggests technological development followed a different trajectory than scholars have assumed. The underground complexes show evidence of systematic construction, implying not just individual settlements, but coordinated infrastructure development across vast distances. Army Corps of Engineers hydraulic specialist Luther Daniels has spent 4 decades studying water management systems, from the Mississippi River locks to irrigation projects in Iraq and Afghanistan. His expertise in ancient hydraulics led him to an uncomfortable conclusion about the Sahara's buried mysteries that challenges everything he learned in engineering school. What we're seeing in the radar data isn't primitive irrigation, Daniels states flatly, his office wall covered with technical drawings and satellite photographs. It's sophisticated hydroengineering that rivals modern systems. Whoever built those underground channels understood water pressure, elevation gradients, and flow dynamics better than most contemporary engineers. The computational requirements alone for designing such networks suggest mathematical knowledge that historians place thousands of years in the future. Daniels has analyzed hydraulic systems worldwide, but nothing prepared him for the complexity hidden beneath the Sahara. The buried infrastructure demonstrates understanding of principles that weren't formally codified until the Renaissance. Pressure regulation systems, overflow channels, and distribution networks show evidence of centralized planning coordinated across hundreds of kilometers. The engineering tolerances required for such construction would challenge modern contractors with contemporary equipment. Look at these flow calculations, Daniels says, spreading blueprints across his desk. The gradient analysis shows precision to within centimeters over distances exceeding 50 kilometers. That requires surveying technology and mathematical modeling that we attribute to much later civilizations. Either our timeline is completely wrong, or someone had access to knowledge that was subsequently lost. The water management systems reveal another disturbing possibility. If the Saharan civilization possessed advanced hydraulic engineering, their disappearance raises questions about technological regression versus preservation. Did the knowledge vanish with the culture, or was it deliberately concealed? The systematic nature of the engineering suggests institutional knowledge, education systems, professional guilds, written records. Complex infrastructure doesn't emerge spontaneously. It requires generational accumulation of expertise. Former Navy Seabees construction chief Timothy Walsh knows engineering when he sees it. During his military career, he built everything from airstrips in Vietnam to submarine bases in the Pacific. His trained eye for construction techniques led him to study the Sahara's anomalous structures through a different lens, that of someone who has actually built things designed to last centuries. Look at the thermal imagery from those buried sites, Walsh demonstrates, pointing to satellite photos on his laptop screen. The heat retention patterns show right angles, parallel walls, and what looks like courtyard complexes. That's not geological. That's human architecture, and it's built to last. The thermal signatures indicate different materials used strategically: dense stone for load-bearing walls, lighter materials for partitions. This suggests not just construction knowledge, but materials engineering. Walsh's analysis extends beyond simple identification of artificial structures. The construction patterns visible in thermal imaging reveal sophisticated understanding of desert building techniques. The buried complexes show evidence of expansion phases, suggesting communities that grew organically over time rather than appearing suddenly. Foundation systems demonstrate knowledge of soil mechanics and thermal management, crucial for long-term stability in extreme environments. The construction sequencing is what really gets me, Walsh continues. You can see the evolution in building techniques across different sections. These weren't built by one generation. They represent accumulated knowledge refined over centuries. That kind of institutional memory requires written records, standardized measurements, and educational systems. We're looking at evidence of civilization-level organization. There are also the mysterious rock engravings scattered across the Sahara from Algeria to Libya. Thousands of carvings depicting cattle herders, fish, boats, and even what appear to be astronomical symbols. The Tassili Niger Plateau alone contains over 15,000 rock paintings. Some date back nearly 12,000 years, showing a vibrant world of rituals, dance, and herds grazing under rain-laden clouds. These images seem to whisper that the people of the Green Sahara were not simple wanderers. They observed the stars, managed herds, and built shrines. But to whom were they built? And why do some of these paintings depict figures wearing what appear to be masks or elongated helmets unlike any known from the period? More disturbing still are the recurring astronomical alignments found in rock art across thousands of kilometers, suggesting coordinated observation networks that would require sophisticated communication systems. Colonel James Peterson, retired Air Force weather reconnaissance officer, has tracked atmospheric patterns across 6 continents. His decades of analyzing climate data from high-altitude flights gave him unique insights into rapid environmental change. Peterson's post-military research into paleoclimatic events revealed disturbing parallels between ancient climate disasters and modern environmental threats that challenge conventional understanding of natural systems. The speed of desertification in the Sahara wasn't natural, Peterson argues from his Colorado office. Walls lined with meteorological charts spanning decades of global weather patterns. Weather patterns don't shift that quickly without external catalysts. My analysis of ice core data and atmospheric models suggests a triggering event, possibly extraterrestrial impact or massive volcanic activity that disrupted global circulation patterns. Peterson's research combines military meteorological expertise with climatological data from sources unavailable to civilian researchers. His access to classified atmospheric monitoring records from Cold War reconnaissance flights revealed anomalous readings that suggest the Saharan climate shift involved factors beyond orbital mechanics. Particulate analysis from ice cores shows evidence of massive atmospheric disruption occurring precisely when the Green Sahara began its transformation into desert. The isotopic signatures in Greenland ice cores from 5,500 years ago show sudden increases in atmospheric dust and unusual mineral compositions, Peterson explains, pointing to spectral analysis charts. These aren't consistent with gradual climate change. The data suggests rapid, catastrophic disruption of atmospheric circulation, the kind of event that would require external forcing mechanisms beyond normal planetary cycles. The meteorological evidence supports theories of sudden civilizational collapse rather than gradual migration. If Peterson's analysis is correct, the Saharan societies didn't slowly adapt to changing conditions. They faced immediate environmental catastrophe that would have overwhelmed even advanced technological capabilities. The implications extend beyond archaeology into questions about planetary vulnerability and the fragility of technological civilization. Howard Kellerman worked for 30 years in the Smithsonian's storage facilities, cataloging artifacts that rarely saw public display. His insider's perspective on institutional archaeology revealed patterns of suppression that extend far beyond academic politics. Kellerman's whistleblower testimony exposes systematic concealment of discoveries that challenge established historical narratives, particularly regarding technological capabilities of prehistoric civilizations. We had artifacts from Saharan expeditions that dated to impossible time periods, Kellerman reveals from his Maryland home, voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who has carried institutional secrets too long. Worked metal tools, pottery with sophisticated glazing techniques, even what appeared to be proto-writing systems. These items were systematically lost in storage or transferred to classified collections. The official explanation was always the same: dating errors, contaminated samples, misidentification. Kellerman's testimony reveals institutional mechanisms designed to suppress archaeological discoveries that contradict established timelines. Items showing advanced metallurgy, precision tool-making, and systematic writing systems from Saharan sites were routinely removed from public collections. Documentation was altered, provenance records disappeared, and researchers asking difficult questions found their access restricted. The pattern became obvious after a few years, Kellerman continues. Anything that suggested technological sophistication predating accepted chronologies got buried. I saw carved stone tablets with geometric inscriptions that resembled mathematical notation, bronze alloys that required advanced smelting techniques, and ceramic fragments with glazing that wouldn't be seen again until medieval times. All of it disappeared into restricted collections, or was declared culturally sensitive and removed from study. The systematic suppression Kellerman describes extends beyond simple academic conservatism. The coordination required to remove artifacts across multiple institutions suggests deliberate policy rather than individual bias. His documentation reveals communication between museum administrators, government liaisons, and anonymous funding sources that influenced curatorial decisions regarding Saharan materials. Paul Richardson spent 40 years as a petroleum geologist for ExxonMobil, drilling core samples across North Africa's oil fields. His subsurface surveys revealed geological anomalies that company executives preferred to ignore. Richardson's private collection of unusual drill core samples contains evidence of worked stone and metallic debris found hundreds of feet below the desert surface in geological layers that predate human civilization by conventional chronology. We hit pockets of organized material that had no business being where we found it, Richardson explains from his Texas ranch, handling a core sample that gleams with unnatural uniformity. Company policy was to note the anomaly and keep drilling, but I kept samples. What I found wasn't natural deposition. It was manufactured material, buried deeper than any known archaeological layer. Richardson's drill cores contain metallic fragments that defy conventional geological explanation. Spectral analysis reveals alloys that require controlled smelting temperatures and precise compositional ratios. The materials show evidence of deliberate manufacture rather than natural formation. Yet they were extracted from depths corresponding to geological periods predating known metallurgy by millennia. The company geologists couldn't explain it, Richardson continues, examining a core sample under magnification. We found worked bronze at depths that put it at least 8,000 years old, maybe older. The alloy composition showed tin percentages that require sophisticated metallurgical knowledge. This wasn't accidental copper-tin mixing. It was engineered bronze with specific performance characteristics. The petroleum industry's access to deep subsurface samples provides unique insights into prehistoric technology that archaeological excavation cannot reach. Richardson's collection documents systematic metalworking across multiple sites, suggesting widespread technological capability rather than isolated innovation. The consistency of techniques across geographic regions implies cultural exchange networks and standardized knowledge transmission systems. Corporate suppression of these findings extends beyond simple commercial concerns. Richardson describes coordination between energy companies, government agencies, and academic institutions to limit access to controversial subsurface discoveries. Drilling reports were classified, samples were confiscated, and researchers asking difficult questions found their careers terminated. They didn't just want the anomalies ignored, Richardson reveals. They wanted them erased. Sample storage facilities were reorganized, documentation was digitized, and then the originals disappeared, and key personnel were transferred or retired early. Someone invested considerable resources in making sure these discoveries stayed buried. The transformation from paradise to wasteland was neither gradual nor gentle. Somewhere around 5,000 years ago, the Sahara's rivers began to falter. The lakes receded, the skies turned dry, and the once green heart of North Africa hardened into dust. What had been an enormous ecosystem of forests, grasslands, and flowing water transformed into the largest hot desert on Earth in what geological terms consider an instant. Geologists have pieced together how this lush paradise turned to dust, but the speed of change challenges natural explanations. Around 5,500 years ago, the monsoons began to weaken. The Earth's orbit shifted slightly, altering rainfall patterns. Lakes dried, vegetation retreated, and the wind began sculpting dunes across the land. This transformation didn't happen overnight, but within a few centuries, perhaps a single human generation, fertile plains became barren expanses. Dennis Crawford supervised oil drilling operations across the Western Sahara for 2 decades. His field reports documented subsurface cavities and metallic debris that suggested human activity in regions supposedly uninhabited for millennia. Crawford's testimony reveals patterns of corporate and government suppression that extend far beyond commercial interests, involving coordination between energy companies, intelligence agencies, and international regulatory bodies. "We found chambers," Crawford states simply, his weathered hands steady despite the weight of what he's revealing. Not caves. Chambers, rectangular spaces with dressed stone walls, found at depths that put them thousands of years before any known civilization. The company sealed the sites and classified our reports. When we asked why, they said it was above our pay grade. Crawford's discovery logs document multiple encounters with artificial structures during routine drilling operations. The chamber showed evidence of deliberate construction, uniform dimensions, engineered joints, and tool marks consistent with systematic stoneworking. In several instances, drilling teams encountered void spaces containing manufactured objects that were immediately confiscated by company security personnel. "The objects weren't primitive," Crawford continues. "We found metal implements with complex geometries, ceramic fragments with precision molding, and what looked like mechanical components. Everything was removed within hours of discovery. The drill sites were backfilled, coordinates were classified, and the crew was transferred to different projects. Standard procedure," they said. The systematic concealment Crawford describes involves multiple levels of institutional control. Energy companies maintain specialized teams to handle anomalous discoveries, complete with pre-established protocols for evidence removal and personnel management. The coordination suggests advanced knowledge of what might be found and systematic preparation for suppressing significant archaeological discoveries. Arthur Chambers, former mining executive, spent his career evaluating mineral rights across North Africa. His access to restricted zones in Algeria and Libya revealed geological anomalies that government and corporate interests collaborate to conceal. Chambers's testimony exposes the intersection of resource, extraction, and archaeological suppression, revealing how commercial and political interests align to control access to prehistoric evidence. Certain areas are permanently off-limits to commercial mining, Chambers reveals from his Nevada ranch, voice carrying the authority of someone who spent decades navigating corporate politics. Not because of mineral rights or environmental protection, but because of what lies beneath the surface. I've seen survey data showing massive underground complexes that predate historical civilization. The official policy is containment. Keep it buried, keep it classified. Chambers describes a shadow infrastructure of archaeological management that operates parallel to official academic institutions. Private security contractors maintain perimeter control around sensitive sites. Satellite monitoring tracks unauthorized access, and international agreements restrict research permissions. The level of coordination suggests long-term strategic planning rather than reactive suppression. The surveys we conducted in the 1990s mapped underground networks extending across multiple countries, Chambers continues. Geometric patterns that couldn't be natural, material compositions that suggested advanced manufacturing, and architectural scales that implied major population centers. All of it was classified above my clearance level, but the implications were obvious. The Richat structure, or Eye of the Sahara, stands as one of Earth's strangest natural features. From space, it resembles a giant target imprinted in the desert, a series of concentric rings that rise and fall like ripples frozen in stone. For decades, scientists believed it to be a collapsed dome, an eroded geological formation born from the slow breathing of the planet. Yet for others, the eye has never been just geology. When the first astronauts saw it during orbital missions in the 1960s, They described it as a beacon in the desert. Since then, it has captured the imagination of explorers, archaeologists, and dreamers. Its massive rings, stretching across what would have been the center of the green Sahara, seem to fit no clear natural pattern. Each layer reveals a different type of rock, some dating back hundreds of millions of years. Marine Corps Gunnery Sergeant retired Michael Torres conducted demolitions training across North Africa during the 1980s. His expertise in explosive effects and blast pattern analysis led him to study the Richat structure from a different perspective, that of someone trained to recognize the signatures of massive detonations. Torres's analysis reveals disturbing parallels between the eye's formation and patterns associated with extraordinary explosive events. The concentric fracturing isn't consistent with gradual erosion, Torres explains from his workshop in Arizona, surrounded by geological surveys and blast analysis charts. The ring structure shows characteristics of shockwave propagation through layered materials. The radial organization suggests energy release from a central point, not slow geological processes. If I saw this pattern at a bombing range, I'd be looking for the crater. Torres's demolitions expertise provides unique insights into the forces required to create the Richat structure's distinctive geometry. The precise circular organization and consistent spacing between rings suggest coordinated energy release rather than random geological processes. His calculations indicate energy levels far exceeding natural seismic activity, pointing toward either extraterrestrial impact or technological intervention. The depth-to-diameter ratios are wrong for natural formation, Torres continues, pointing to cross-sectional diagrams. The energy distribution patterns suggest controlled detonation sequences rather than single impact events. Either we're looking at the most precisely aimed meteor in geological history, or someone engineered this formation deliberately. Some claim the eye's shape eerily resembles Plato's description of Atlantis, a circular city surrounded by alternating rings of land and sea. When adjusted for ancient Greek units of measurement, the dimensions align with unsettling precision. Most geologists dismiss the comparison, pointing out the lack of artifacts or worked stone. Yet others counter that the absence of evidence may not prove anything definitive, particularly given the systematic suppression of archaeological discoveries documented by industry insiders. The ancient Egyptians knew of Libyan desert glass, incorporating it into royal jewelry, including artifacts buried with Pharaoh Tutankhamun. This suggests trade networks extending deep into the Sahara during periods when the region was supposedly uninhabitable. The glass itself requires temperatures exceeding 1,600 degrees Celsius to form, heat levels achievable only through extraordinary events such as meteor impact, nuclear detonation, or advanced technological processes. Dr. Elena Vasquez, retired Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory physicist, spent her career analyzing the effects of high-energy events on geological materials. Her classified research into nuclear testing effects led her to study ancient vitrification sites across the Sahara with unique expertise in extreme temperature material science. Vasquez's analysis reveals signatures that challenge conventional explanations for desert glass formation. The vitrified samples I've analyzed show isotopic characteristics inconsistent with natural processes, Vasquez states from her California home, handling glass fragments with scientific precision. The silica matrix displays uniform heating patterns and controlled cooling rates that suggest artificial temperature management. Natural vitrification from meteor impact or lightning produces chaotic thermal signatures. These samples show evidence of systematic heat application. Vasquez's laboratory analysis extends beyond simple identification of artificial heating. The glass samples contain trace elements that suggest advanced metallurgical processes occurring simultaneously with vitrification. microscopic analysis reveals embedded metallic particles with compositions requiring sophisticated alloying techniques. The integration of metal and glass matrices indicates technological capabilities beyond conventional prehistoric capabilities. The manufacturing signatures are unmistakable, Vasquez continues, pointing to spectroscopic analysis charts. Controlled atmosphere smelting, precise temperature regulation, and systematic cooling protocols. We're seeing evidence of industrial-scale high-temperature processing in materials that predate known metallurgy by thousands of years. The implications of Vasquez's findings extend beyond archaeology into questions about technological development and cultural transmission. If advanced high-temperature processing existed in prehistoric Sahara, it suggests technological trajectories different from established historical models. The systematic nature of the processes indicates institutional knowledge, educational systems, standardized techniques, and generational skill transmission. Across the deep interior of the desert, far from the Nile and the Atlantic coast, the sands concealed something stranger than bones or pottery. Beneath the dunes of Mauritania, Chad, and Libya, geologists have found dark, glass-like stones scattered across the surface, rocks that seem to have been melted by heat so intense it fused the sand into crystalline formations that gleam with unnatural uniformity under desert sunlight. The distribution patterns of vitrified materials across the Sahara suggest coordinated high-temperature events rather than random natural phenomena. Sites containing desert glass align with buried river systems and underground structural anomalies, implying technological integration across vast geographic scales. In some vitrified regions, microscopic analysis reveals patterns more consistent with controlled heating than with natural explosions. The glass surfaces are uniform, not chaotic, as if the material had been deliberately melted and cooled. Some scientists suggest that ancient people may have experimented with early metallurgy, creating kilns capable of sustained high temperatures. If so, the Sahara's black stones might represent one of humanity's first steps toward manipulating fire on an industrial scale, a technological revolution now forgotten. Yet there is no definitive proof. No furnaces, no tools, no artifacts have been found in direct association with these materials. Only the stones themselves remain, silent and inexplicable, like obsidian mirrors reflecting the memory of a world undone. Whether they are remnants of a civilization's fall or nature's own monument, they stand as a reminder of how little we truly know of the world beneath the sand. The desert, though silent today, was once crossed by routes as intricate as the veins of a living body. Long before camels trudged across its horizons, the Sahara was a web of pathways, some carved by rivers, others traced by caravans of men and animals moving between oases. What survives now are only faint imprints, stone cairns marking forgotten trails, worn beads buried in dunes, and shards of pottery where traders once rested beneath the stars. When people think of desert trade, they picture the camel caravans of the medieval empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. These vast networks connected the Mediterranean with sub-Saharan Africa, transporting gold, salt, and ivory along routes stretching thousands of kilometers. Yet recent archaeological studies suggest that some of these roads were not new. They were continuations of much older pathways, possibly dating back to the Green Sahara itself. Chief Warrant Officer Calvin Rodriguez, retired Army intelligence specialist, spent 15 years mapping insurgent supply routes across North African deserts. His expertise in tracking movement patterns through hostile terrain led him to analyze ancient trade networks using modern counterintelligence techniques. Rodriguez's research reveals systematic organization in prehistoric Saharan transportation that suggests institutional coordination rather than opportunistic commerce. The route patterns show strategic thinking. Rodriguez explains from his New Mexico home, satellite maps covering every available surface. Whoever established these pathways understood logistics, resource management, and operational security. The spacing between waypoints is too consistent to be accidental. We're looking at evidence of centralized planning and systematic infrastructure development. Rodriguez's analysis applies military logistics principles to archaeological evidence, revealing organizational capabilities that historians have not fully recognized. The distribution of ancient settlements follows patterns consistent with coordinated supply chain management. Water sources, defensive positions, and resource extraction sites align in ways that suggest systematic territorial control rather than random occupation. The network architecture implies command structure, Rodriguez continues, pointing to overlaid topographical maps. Primary routes with secondary connections, backup pathways, and strategic choke points. This wasn't improvised. It was engineered by people who understood large-scale transportation planning. The systematic nature of ancient Saharan trade routes challenges assumptions about prehistoric organizational capabilities. Rodriguez's documentation reveals geographic patterns that parallel modern military logistics networks, suggesting institutional knowledge transmission across generations. The consistency of design principles across vast distances implies standardized education systems and professional specialization. Master Sergeant Thomas Mitchell, retired Air Force civil engineering, spent his career constructing airfields and infrastructure in challenging environments worldwide. His expertise in desert construction led him to study ancient Saharan building techniques from an engineering perspective. Mitchell's analysis reveals construction capabilities that exceed conventional estimates of prehistoric technology. The foundation systems I've analyzed through ground-penetrating radar show sophisticated understanding of desert engineering challenges, Mitchell states from his workshop filled with technical drawings and construction manuals. Thermal expansion management, moisture control, and structural load distribution techniques that we consider modern innovations. These builders understood materials, science, and structural engineering at levels that shouldn't have existed for thousands more years. Mitchell's construction background provides unique insights into the technical requirements for building permanent structures in extreme desert environments. The buried foundations show evidence of advanced planning, with material selection and construction techniques optimized for long-term stability. The engineering solutions demonstrate understanding of principles that weren't formally codified until much later periods. The drainage systems are what really impressed me, Mitchell continues, examining radar imagery of subsurface structures. Integrated water management that accounts for seasonal flooding, thermal cycling, and sand infiltration. The engineering tolerances are tighter than most modern desert construction. Someone spent generations perfecting these techniques. Long before satellites traced the hidden rivers beneath the Sahara, ancient mapmakers had already drawn them, not with machines, but with ink, imagination, and memory. For centuries, explorers, scholars, and sailors sketched the unknown interior of Africa with confident strokes, as if they knew what lay beyond the dunes. On their maps, the Sahara was not an empty wasteland, but a place of lakes, mountain chains, and inland seas. Many of these features, dismissed as fantasy by later historians, align eerily well with what modern radar and topographical scans have now confirmed. The mystery of these old maps has haunted scholars for generations. How could cartographers from the distant past, without satellites or aerial surveys, have drawn the outlines of rivers buried thousands of years beneath the desert? Among the most enigmatic of these documents is the Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral using sources he claimed were from the time of Alexander. It famously depicts parts of Africa's west coast drawn with astonishing precision, alongside a curious inland network of rivers flowing northward through what we now know as the desert. The Nile is there, of course, but so are other watercourses branching toward what appears to be the Atlantic, rivers no longer visible on the surface of the Earth. When modern scientists overlaid the map onto satellite imagery, they found that some of its drawn lines matched almost exactly the courses of paleo rivers identified by NASA radar. The correspondence was so precise that it challenged everything historians thought they knew about medieval cartographic capabilities. How could a 16th-century admiral have possessed knowledge that would not be confirmed until space-age technology made it possible to see through sand? The implications extend beyond simple historical curiosity. If Piri Reis had access to ancient sources that preserved accurate geographical knowledge for thousands of years, it suggests systematic preservation of information across multiple civilizations. The mathematical precision required to maintain cartographic accuracy over such time periods indicates institutional continuity far more sophisticated than historians have acknowledged. Commander Patricia Williams, retired Navy hydrographic surveyor, spent her career mapping ocean floors and coastal regions using the most advanced naval technology available. Her expertise in precision cartography led her to analyze ancient maps from a technical perspective that reveals extraordinary accuracy in supposedly primitive geographical knowledge. The Piri Reis map shows understanding of longitude calculations that shouldn't have been possible without chronometers, Williams explains from her Virginia Beach home, historical charts spread across her dining table alongside modern navigational equipment. The positioning accuracy suggests mathematical and astronomical knowledge that exceeds what we attribute to 16th-century navigation technology. Someone had access to very precise geographical data. Williams's analysis extends beyond simple map comparison. The projection techniques visible in ancient cartographic sources demonstrate understanding of spherical geometry and coordinate systems that parallel modern mapping conventions. The mathematical principles required for such accuracy suggest educational institutions capable of preserving and transmitting complex scientific knowledge across generations. What really intrigues me is the systematic nature of the errors, Williams continues, pointing to comparative overlays. The inaccuracies aren't random. They follow consistent patterns that suggest the original sources were copied multiple times over centuries. We're seeing the degradation you'd expect from institutional knowledge transmission, but the core geographical framework remains remarkably intact. The preservation of accurate geographical knowledge across millennia implies more than individual genius or lucky coincidence. Williams's documentation reveals evidence of systematic cartographic tradition that maintained precision through institutional mechanisms, schools, libraries, professional guilds, and standardized measurement systems. The technical sophistication suggests scientific culture rather than isolated discovery. Staff Sergeant Kevin Foster, retired Marine, Corps reconnaissance specialist, applied modern surveillance and tracking techniques to analyze ancient Saharan trade and migration patterns. His expertise in movement analysis and pattern recognition revealed organizational structures in prehistoric archaeological evidence that suggest coordinated planning across vast geographic and temporal scales. The settlement patterns show operational planning that I recognize from modern military logistics, Foster states from his North Carolina home, archaeological site maps covering his office walls. Resource positioning, defensive considerations, and communication networks planned with strategic depth. These weren't random settlements. They were systematically placed components of a larger operational framework. Foster's analysis reveals evidence of coordinated infrastructure development that suggests centralized planning authority. The spacing of ancient settlements, the location of resource extraction sites, and the routing of transportation networks follow patterns consistent with institutional decision-making rather than organic development. The systematic organization implies governmental structures capable of long-term strategic planning. The defensive positioning is what really convinced me, Foster continues, indicating topographical overlays showing ancient settlement locations. Whoever placed these communities understood terrain analysis, fields of fire, and mutual support positioning. The site selection shows military engineering knowledge that we consider sophisticated modern concepts. The archaeological evidence Foster documents suggests organized territorial control rather than nomadic wandering. The defensive considerations visible in settlement patterns imply conflict management and territorial security concerns that require institutional military knowledge. The coordination across vast distances suggests communication networks and command structures that exceed conventional estimates of prehistoric capabilities. Across the shifting sands of the central Sahara, scattered shards of pottery lie half-buried beneath the wind. Some are smooth and painted with faint patterns, others coarse, marked by the imprint of woven mats. To the untrained eye, they may seem trivial, relics of nomads or herders passing through. But to archaeologists, these fragments are the fingerprints of a vanished people, the remnants of societies that flourished during the Sahara's Green Age. Slowly, piece by piece, they are revealing a startling truth. The desert was once home to organized, settled communities, perhaps even the first in Africa. At first, the notion seemed impossible. The Sahara, stretching nearly 9 million square kilometers, appears today as the very definition of lifelessness. Yet excavations in Chad, Niger, Mali, and Sudan tell a different story. Beneath dunes and dry lake beds, researchers have uncovered traces of ancient villages, hearths, granaries, and burial sites. Radiocarbon, dating places many of them between 7,000 and 9,000 years ago, the same period that witnessed the rise of early agricultural societies along the Nile and the Euphrates. The implications challenge fundamental assumptions about the development and distribution of human civilization. In southern Algeria's Tassili Niger Plateau, archaeologists unearthed large clusters of habitation mounds surrounded by circular stone walls. These were not mere camps. They were planned settlements. The inhabitants cultivated wild grains and kept domesticated cattle, making them among the earliest known pastoralists in North Africa. Their pottery, decorated with geometric motifs, shows remarkable uniformity across vast distances, suggesting communication or trade between communities separated by hundreds of kilometers. The question that remains is not whether water once filled the Sahara, that is now beyond doubt, but whether humans had time to build something enduring before it vanished. Could an entire civilization have arisen during one of those wet periods, only to be erased so completely that its existence survives only in scattered bones and fading rock art? Dr. Sarah Chen Martinez, former Defense Intelligence Agency analyst specializing in technological assessment, spent her career evaluating foreign capabilities for potential military applications. Her expertise in recognizing advanced technology signatures led her to analyze Saharan archaeological evidence from a different perspective, that of someone trained to identify sophisticated capabilities regardless of their age or cultural origin. The organizational patterns visible in these prehistoric settlements exceed anything we see in contemporary Neolithic sites. Chen Martinez explains, from her secure home office, classified technological assessment protocols adapted for archaeological analysis, spread across multiple monitors. The coordination evident in infrastructure placement, resource management, and territorial organization suggests institutional capabilities that we typically associate with much later civilizations. Chen Martinez's background in technology assessment provides unique insights into the systematic nature of Saharan prehistoric development. Her analysis reveals patterns that suggest not just advanced individual communities, but coordinated regional development with standardized technologies and shared organizational principles. The evidence points toward institutional knowledge systems capable of maintaining technological standards across vast geographic areas. What I see here is evidence of systematic technology transfer, Chen Martinez continues, pointing to comparative analysis charts. Standardized construction techniques, uniform measurement systems, and consistent manufacturing processes distributed across thousands of square kilometers. This level of coordination requires institutional infrastructure, education systems, quality control mechanisms, and centralized planning authorities. The technological signatures Chen Martinez identifies challenge conventional chronologies of human development. The standardization visible in prehistoric Saharan sites suggests organizational capabilities that historians typically place much later in human history. The systematic nature of the evidence implies not just technological innovation, but institutional frameworks for preserving and transmitting complex knowledge across generations. Major General Robert Stone, retired Army Corps of Engineers district commander, oversaw infrastructure development in challenging environments worldwide. His experience with large-scale construction projects in hostile terrain led him to study ancient Saharan engineering from a project management perspective. Stone's analysis reveals organizational capabilities that exceed conventional estimates of prehistoric coordination. The scale of coordination evident in these buried infrastructure networks suggests command structures that I recognize from major engineering projects. Stone states from his Pentagon area office, infrastructure development timelines covering his conference table. We're looking at evidence of systematic project management, resource allocation, and quality control that requires institutional frameworks typically associated with state-level organization. Stone's engineering background provides insights into the logistical requirements for coordinating infrastructure development across the prehistoric Sahara. His calculations reveal resource management challenges that would strain modern organizational capabilities, yet the archaeological evidence suggests successful completion of continent-spanning projects using technologies that historians consider primitive. The engineering tolerances alone suggest sophisticated understanding of materials science, structural analysis, and project coordination, Stone continues, examining technical specifications derived from archaeological measurements. The precision evident in foundation systems, drainage networks, and transportation infrastructure indicates not just individual expertise, but institutional knowledge systems capable of maintaining technical standards across multiple generations. The evidence Stone documents suggests governmental capabilities rather than tribal organization. The coordination required for continent-spanning infrastructure projects implies taxation systems, labor specialization, and administrative hierarchies that historians have not recognized in prehistoric Africa. The systematic organization challenges fundamental assumptions about early human political development. Somewhere beneath those shifting hills, the relics of an entire world still sleep, waiting for the day when the desert turns green again and the past, long exiled, returns to the light. For now, the Sahara remains what it has always been, a paradox of stillness and movement, of concealment and revelation. Each grain of sand represents time collapsed, thousands of years of wind, heat, and burial, yet technology continues to peer beneath the veil. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed strange rectangular anomalies in parts of southern Algeria and northern Mali. Some researchers dismiss them as natural rock formations. Others quietly admit they don't yet know what they are. The Sahara's mystery is not just in its emptiness, but in what lies beneath. The challenge is that the desert is constantly moving. Dunes shift, erase, and cover again. A structure uncovered today may vanish tomorrow. Archaeological expeditions often return with only fragments, shards of pottery, pieces of tools, or the faint outline of a hearth. But even these fragments whisper of something once alive, organized, and deeply human. The more the Sahara is studied, the more it contradicts itself. It is both cradle and tomb, ocean and desert, memory and oblivion. If the Green Sahara once gave birth to a culture older than Egypt or Sumer, then its disappearance would mark one of the greatest erasures in human history. Some researchers believe that the stories of ancient floods, or even the myth of Atlantis itself, may have been rooted in the memory of this lost world, a civilization wiped clean when the desert claimed its land. And yet, the story does not end with silence. Satellite data continues to reveal more hidden riverbeds, each suggesting that the Sahara was not merely a transient grassland, but a vast interconnected ecosystem capable of sustaining large populations for millennia. The desert is both destroyer and preserver. It erases surface traces, but protects what it buries, sealing it away in dry silence. The question that lingers is not whether such a civilization existed. The evidence grows stronger each year. But whether we have the courage to confront what it means about our understanding of human history. Climate scientists studying the Earth's orbital cycles have discovered a recurring pattern. A slow oscillation that turns the desert green every 20,000 years. It happened before, when the Sahara bloomed with lakes and rivers, and it will happen again. The evidence lies not in myth or speculation, but in layers of mud at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, where cores reveal rhythmic pulses of ancient vegetation swept north by African winds. The next green age may come sooner than we think. When it does, and rivers flow again through these valleys, perhaps the sand will surrender its secrets, and the world will rediscover the forgotten civilizations that once thrived beneath the sun and storm of the prehistoric Sahara. Climate models suggest that as the Earth's orbit continues to tilt, North Africa will begin receiving stronger monsoons within the next 10,000 years. But already, smaller changes are underway. The greening at the edges, the strange persistence of seasonal lakes, and the faint recovery of vegetation hint that the desert is stirring. Slowly, imperceptibly, the balance is shifting. When the rain returns in earnest, the transformation will be profound. Sand seas will break apart. Dunes will collapse into plains. The same erosion that once buried civilizations will now uncover them. Dr. James Mitchell, former NASA planetary geologist who analyzed soil samples from Mars missions, brings unique perspective to understanding the Sahara's cyclical transformations. His expertise in planetary climate systems reveals patterns that extend beyond terrestrial experience, suggesting that the Earth's desert cycles may be more complex and dramatic than conventional models predict. The orbital mechanics driving Saharan climate change operate on multiple overlapping cycles. Mitchell explains from his research facility, planetary climate models displaying on wall-mounted screens. When these cycles synchronize, the environmental transformations can be remarkably rapid. My analysis suggests we may be approaching such a synchronization point within the next few centuries, not millennia. Mitchell's planetary perspective provides insights into the speed and magnitude of potential environmental change. His calculations suggest that when the Sahara transforms again, the changes could occur within human lifetimes rather than geological timescales. The implications for archaeological preservation and discovery are profound. Rapid climate transitions create unique preservation conditions, Mitchell continues, examining soil analysis data from multiple planetary environments. Materials buried under specific conditions can remain perfectly preserved for thousands of years, then emerge in pristine condition when environmental conditions shift. We may be on the verge of the largest archaeological revelation in human history. You walk away from the edge of understanding, but the desert follows you. In dreams, in quiet moments, in the space between certainty and doubt, the Sahara whispers its ancient secrets. And you know with the certainty that comes from standing where time folds back on itself, that some truths are too vast for any single lifetime to contain. The lost civilization beneath the sands is not just about the past. It's about the future we're building and the mysteries we're brave enough to face. In the testimonies of retired intelligence analysts, the calculations of military engineers, and the suppressed evidence of corporate whistleblowers, a pattern emerges that challenges everything we thought we knew about human development. The systematic suppression of archaeological evidence suggests that some truths are considered too dangerous for public knowledge. But why? What threatens established power structures about acknowledging advanced prehistoric capabilities? The answer may lie in the implications for contemporary institutional authority. If human civilization has risen and fallen before, if technological knowledge has been lost and recovered across millennia, then current political and academic hierarchies lose their claims to inevitable progress and exclusive expertise. The wind offers no answers, only silence. But somewhere beneath it all, the pulse still breathes, waiting for someone to listen closely enough to hear. And in that silence, another mystery begins to take shape, one that may finally tell us who we were before we became who we are, and what we lost when the great green heart of Africa turned to dust. For now, the Sahara waits as it has for millennia. Patient, immense, and eternal. It holds within it the story of both death and rebirth, of civilizations lost and those yet to come. The rain will fall again, the dunes will crumble, and in that fleeting age of renewal, the past will meet the future on the same ground under the same sky where once the world was green. When the sandstorms quiet and the night stretches over the Sahara, the desert speaks in frequencies only the patient can hear. Beneath the silence lies the heartbeat of the buried world, waiting for its time to rise again.